And I think we're live, Dixon. How are we doing today?
We're doing great, Sean. Another beautiful day in the neighborhood.
That's right, magic. So we're
Hmm.
live. I thought we'd do this one live because it's fairly lightweight. If anybody wants to chime in with any clips or with any feedback, they're more than welcome to. We're going to be discussing the Alec Baldwin Rust film shooting this week, and I think it's a good one to talk about after our last recording because we did have quite a healthy discussion on guns, and this is an interesting one because I've been reading about this one. I don't know if you've looked into this one too much, but I think there's a core question as to liability here and who's responsible. And I found it interesting watching. I don't know
Yeah,
if you saw the
I
interview
was
at all.
wondering. I did not. I did. I've heard it described to me, so I'll be interested to see the clips you pulled. Because I'll be honest, like I remember talking to my sister actually within a couple of days after the incident originally occurred, because I, just was flipping on the internet. Of course, I'd heard about it, but there was this headline on Yahoo that I thought was like dramatically unfair. It said something like, Alec Baldwin shoots, a crew member on set, like in a way that implied that, he just lost it and grabbed the nearest gun and and it's like, that's not what happened. Listen, Alec Baldwin is obviously, although theoretically his politics and mind align,
Yeah.
I mean, I would put him in the incredibly obnoxious category. He is not an appealing human being at all, despite the fact that I love 30 Rock and his performance in it. It's like one of my favorite shows. But Alec Baldwin is, he's made a career out of being kind of an asshole.
Alec Baldwin falls into the Tom Cruise category for me.
Like in outer space kind of thing.
He's so Tom Cruise, when Tom Cruise did the infamous Matt Lauer interview, it's one of those things where whenever you see somebody in acting or even in music that does something that's just either questionable, weird, or you really can't connect to them, you don't want to like the stuff they're making or the stuff they're doing.
Oh, sure.
But you do. Like Alec Baldwin, I think my first memory of Alec Baldwin was an incredible film, The Hunt for Red October. Love that film.
Oh, that's a great movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, and his
Beetlejuice though. Come on, Beetlejuice must have seen, because that came out 5 years earlier, and that's a great movie.
That is but he's always been a very talented actor, even comedically. I mean, he is. When I was reading about this, I didn't realize how volatile a character he was personally, which I shouldn't be surprised. He's a Baldwin, and the Baldwins don't,
Well, he was the one who was famous first. Like the rest of them sort of, I think, followed on his coattails. Yes. So you weren't going to know about the whole Baldwin clan thing until Alec, kind of got the foothold in, if that makes sense.
That Family Guy joke where like Alec Baldwin's like got his teats out and he's like, "Come on, suckle up all you Baldwins." Come on, Steven, you're the slow one. it was like all the Baldwins were suckling on the Alec Baldwin teeth. And, which is there's some truth to that.
There a little bit. Billy is the crazy right wing one, right? To like counterbalance Alec.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the Wahlbergs, because you could argue that the Wahlbergs collectively are talented, more talented than I think the Baldwins. You have some good actors
collectively. I think Alec is more talented than any of the Wahlbergs individually.
No, I agree with that. But if you have it's Mark Wahlberg, but Donnie Wahlberg actually is a pretty good actor. Whereas I don't know, I would say that would be the same for any of the Baldwins outside of Alec.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree.
Yeah.
What's that movie, Sliver, right? Notwithstanding.
I've not seen that.
I think that was like one of the Baldwin brothers. I forget which one, Moment in the Sun with Sharon Stone, if I'm remembering correctly.
I know the film. I might have seen it. It was so...
Oh, ages ago. And when I saw it, I was looking for certain things because I was a teenager.
Yes. I think that's probably why I don't remember the plot. I wasn't
well, what are you gonna do?
So I've got some clips from the interview, and just if anybody is has been off the planet for a while, or doesn't watch TV, or has been trying to get off of their social media addiction, Alec Baldwin, producer. Hey Dixon, what's going on here? Easy.
I forgot. I'm on video. Whoopsie.
We had a bit of a crotch shot.
Was that? Oh dear.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm glad you don't wear boxer shorts when you're recording, right? Or we would have
No,
seen the
no,
secret
just
would have been out.
Levi's. Levi's. If anybody, we should have a prize for the person who can guess which number, 512, 510, 509.
So with the interviews, so what I've got is I got clips from the Alec Baldwin George Stephanopoulos interview. I've got a few other little bits and bobs. I kind of have formed an opinion, but there's certain things that I don't have an opinion on, and I will be looking for any feedback in the comments as to what you think about Alec Baldwin's liability. But I think we'll probably ask those questions as we move forward. So I am going to share my screen here. I think I'm queued up for the first clip. And Dixon, if you don't hear it, will you let me know, please, sir?
I certainly will. I certainly will.
Okay, let me make sure I can hear this thing. Yep. Okay. All right. So there it is. So this is the first clip, and this just I've got a little intro. So this is the first clip where he gets emotional talking about it's Helena Hutchins who was shot. I've got another clip that I'm going to partner up with that from a YouTube channel that I've really gotten into called the Body Language Panel. It's for body language experts. Really love that channel. Where they
I'm interested in that kind of stuff. I wouldn't mind checking that out, but go on.
The clip is interesting because it's talking about a theory as to why they think he's crying. And I find them to be quite legit when they do give their opinion on things. They do seem well schooled.
Can I say something before I'm going to tell you? I can't say that I'm coming into this without a preconceived notion. So let me share what that is. My mom told me about the interview, and she said that she really felt that he did himself a disservice, that he comes across very poorly. So I'm expecting that. I'm going to be interested to see if I find that.
I think this interview, I think we can preface it this way. This interview, I am envisioning his lawyers like with a bottle of scotch watching this going, we are fucked. Because there's no reason, there was no benefit to anything he's like. This whole interview was about him feeling worried about what people are saying about him, and in reality I think we're going to find that the things he is saying is actually making the job of his lawyers much harder in some of the things that he says. But there are some clips where I have examples where I think he's made his defense quite challenging. So and there might be a bit of a delay because it's over 3 parts, and I want to I'll have to jump around here, so I will be pulling the screen back. So why don't we play the first clip?
Don't worry, I'll play a little banjo in between clips. Yeah, right.
Yes. There you go.
The Ukrainian-born cinematographer quickly gelled with Baldwin.
The people who watched The Daily said that her work was beautiful. She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with, and liked by everyone who worked with, and admired.
Oh God, no.
Well, I'm going to play another clip right after this because just add some interesting counterbalance context to this. I don't even know. I'm not making sense.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to jump over to a different clip.
I'm going to tell you right off the bat what I would have done if I were Alec Baldwin. I mean, if I'm going to give this interview and do this, right, I would have asked, part of what makes that little place where he breaks up seem so disingenuous, which it does, is the high level of production that's being overlaid on top of it, the music in the background and all that. I would have said to them, listen, if I'm going to do this interview for you, this isn't a TV show. This is me sitting in front of a camera, pretty much live and without any editing, without any production value. People will be interested in the story. You don't need any of that. You'll get the ratings either way. We're going to do this like a real conversation, like two human beings, not like, another episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever. Anyway.
But and I don't think Alec Baldwin would have taken those terms. I think, I don't know who George Stephanopoulos
is. No, I'm saying if I were Alec Baldwin, I would have insisted on those terms.
Not to be a documentary style.
Yes.
It does come across as very...
Right.
Somebody who's died, there's a case and there's question marks as to the nature of this person's
and
death.
You're making it look like it's a TV show, another thing, Yeah.
But there was a really interesting, only because I have a lot of buy-in to these characters, this channel that I'm about to share. It's the Body Language Panel, and gentleman Chase Hughes talks about something that he heard from actor friends that he has, and I thought this was a really interesting. And I'm not saying this is true. And I think Alec Baldwin is fairly devastated as to what's happened. I think we can all largely agree that he's this isn't what he's wanted, and I think he is quite sad for the family. However, I think what we're going to see throughout this is he's more sad that this has happened to him than anything else. But I'll share this next clip.
I have an acting friend who is on a bunch of soap operas, like Young and the Restless specifically. And he is one of the stars of Young and the Restless. I called him today.
We know him.
We know him. Figure nice this guy. Out. Yeah, you guys have met him. And I talked to a few other people, and one of the tricks that I've heard from several people today that is used is peppermint extract to make somebody cry. And I think it's interesting in this clip, the eyes, the upper eyelid goes from normal color to completely red in just about no time. And this is an unusual response for anybody crying. And I think all of us here have talked to people who are in the worst day of their life. And there's only marks. I think this is interesting. There's only marks on the spots where his hand was touching his face.
So I'm going to go back to the other clip because I wanted to share that with you. I thought you would find that interesting at the very least. So I'm going to go back to the other clip here. I'm going to go back to the when he starts to cry again, just to see if we can see what he's talking about here and see what you think about that.
All right.
Was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired.
So his eyelids aren't red. I think they're saying up here.
I don't know how they can see.
No, but it's they're saying he's got it on his hand, and now his eyelids here all of a sudden red right here. And they're saying that's not a typical physiological response, that your eyelids are going to go red like that. No, he said it's interesting.
Does anybody's eyelids go red when they? I mean, I think of your eyeball going red, like the bloodshot thing. I don't really, think of eyelids being necessarily red. But
yeah, that's the point. And then somebody else, I think later in, talks about his eyebrow now sticking straight up. I'm not saying that he's not sad and he's not really crying. I always am suspicious. It's the same reason when I watch football over here in the UK, or if I watch soccer, whenever you see somebody covering their face, that's them sort of covering up the fact that they're probably not crying as much as it sounds like. Or
you're talking about the old flopping there in the soccer and the football matches.
See,
oh yeah, I'm familiar.
And they cover their face when they hurt their knee. And when I know the last time I cried, when I lost my dog last year.
Okay,
I never cry. And when I cried in front of people, I didn't cover my face. It was like a visceral reaction. And I wiped my face. And I kept wiping it, but whenever I see somebody cover their eyes like this for a bit,
like for holding it, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So he's crying, and I think a lot of the tears and a lot of what we're going to be seeing in this is again him. He's got to be not only. I do think he's sad for the family, but I think there's a big part of him that feels really hard done by, and I think that's going to come out as this interview continues. So I'm just going to find the next clip here. So the next clip is him talking about being handed the gun. So this is going into the process a bit more.
Okay,
here we go. I need a producer.
Well, you see, if you get a producer, though, in the wrong situation, then you get this video that we're looking at, right? Sometimes the producer's not what you need at all.
Or is that you?
What?
We lost somebody.
Hello. I hear you just fine.
Am I gone?
No, I hear you just fine. You hear me?
Oh, wait.
Wow.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm back.
Okay.
Nobody freak out.
This is exciting listening right here.
I heard.
Where's that damn banjo?
We needed the banjo. Okay, so here we go.
I'm gonna buy one, I think, and start. I have a Duke right here that I could.
You need to learn to play it, or we're gonna go below 200 subscribers.
Yeah.
So,
unsubscribe. That's fair.
The next clip is him talking about being handed the gun.
Yeah.
Set the scene right before that happened. You're sitting in a pew in the church.
Right.
What's the scene supposed to be?
The scene is the two guys are there who have got me, cornered, and they think I'm shot pretty bad, and I'm kind of wilting, and they have a gun, and the sound outside distracts them, And I would then draw the gun, cross draw out of my holster, pull the gun up like that, and start to cock the pistol cut. I'm handed a gun, and someone declares, they said, "This is a cold gun."
Dave Halls.
The first AD. In my years on the sets of film, hot gun meant that there was a charge in there, and cold gun meant there was nothing in there. When he's saying this is a cold gun, what he's saying to everybody on the set is, you can relax.
Okay, so that's now I want to add some context to that, because
First of all, go ahead. Yeah,
No, I
have a response to that. Why is there a distinction, even a cold gun versus a hot gun? They should all be cold. You know what I mean? There should be no such thing as a hot gun on a goddamn set. I don't know what that fucking means.
And that's going to be the crux of this case, but that is something they say. It's sort of confirmation. And I don't want to go debating whether I want to go too far into this, but I am going to raise or talk about, because as you know, my brother works on Broadway shows. I got his opinion because he knows people that work with props.
I'm sure.
And I've also
he does sound design, right? So I would think that sometimes you got to work at times with prop masters, because I can envision like where the prop is connected to sound that you're producing for the show. But anyway,
but he's starting to set the stage that he is the innocent here. I'm not giving my opinion, but I'm just setting the stage for what I believe he's doing here. His message right now is, I'm handed a cold gun. This is what I've always been told. The cold gun means that this is a safe gun. And we're practicing. I'm cocking the trigger. This is what we're doing. This is part. And apparently, Helena Hutchins wanted to go over some shots before they started to actually do some recording, or whatever the hell it's called. I don't know the lingo. And this was handed to him by the assistant director. Now, this is going to be a key piece, I think, not only now but in the trial. He's the assistant director, and I'm giving a bit away of what my brother was saying, but the assistant director is not normally the person that would hand him the gun. So there's an armorer on set, or there's supposed to be an armorer on set, who hands the gun and declares this, checks the gun with the actor and says, this is a cold gun. So this is more of a declaration. I've checked it. So I used to work on ropes courses and rock climbing walls.
Yeah,
no different. Yeah, well, you've actually come to join me on one of those.
Yes, it was a fun time.
And you would always, even then, like you would check the carabiner, squeeze check. Of course, we're always they're gonna be locked. Why are we? Of course, and that's kind of the whole ritual that goes into that.
Sure.
So I'm gonna go to the next clip, which is actually talking about the shooting next.
While you do that, I think at some point during this, and I'm sure other folks have gotten into this, but the obvious comparison, of course, here is to 30 years ago in the movie The Crow.
The Crow, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point of comparison to talk about this movie and what happened on that set. And I happen to know quite a bit of exactly how that went down, thanks to, once again, Unsolved Mysteries, the font of all knowledge. So anyway, play the clip if it's cued.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right away, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off. I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
At the moment. The decisive
That was the moment the gun went off. Yeah, that was the moment the gun went off.
Okay, so this is an interesting distinction, because he is saying, now this is where I'm getting a bit confused, in Alec Baldwin, the messaging, or the messenger here, trying to deliver his narrative. And from what I understand, that gun, I've watched quite a few videos on people who are gun experts talking about this, and that gun has, when you pull the trigger, when you cock the, what the fuck is it called? Not the trigger.
The hammer.
Cock the hammer back. It's a hair trigger. It's very easy to flick. And what a lot of people are saying is there's no way that gun fired by him, just because it clicks. So those things prevent it from going forward and triggering the bullet. So he's saying that the trigger didn't go off. And I think a lot of people believe he may have pulled the trigger and not realized it. So he has now, this is the point where he's saying it's accidentally happened.
Well,
he is,
I mean, that like those distinctions to me, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but like,
please.
that's all very much beside the point. The question is, why was there a bullet in the gun? It wouldn't have mattered whether he cocked the hammer, pulled the trigger. Who cares? The point is, why was there a bullet in that goddamn gun? And this is the thought that I've been having all along about this. I mean, I understand that this has been independent production, and obviously that's the complicating factor here, which we'll get to, in terms of Alec Baldwin's personal liability and culpability. But so it's not a big Hollywood production. But I mean, ever since this happened, I've been thinking to myself, listen, Hollywood studios are some of the richest businesses on earth. And they regularly make movies that feature gunplay, for lack of a better term, right? If I were a Hollywood studio, I'll tell you, like, if I were the CEO of Warner Brothers, for example, or Disney or any of them, I would institute a policy today, if I didn't have it already, whereby I will have my prop department set up a direct bill account with Smith & Wesson or whatever gun manufacturer I need, if it is indeed necessary for me to have quote unquote real guns for the purposes of, and today with 4K Ultra HD, people could probably spot a fake prop too easily. Okay, fine. I'm going to get the guns shipped to me directly by the manufacturer. I'm going to have an open account, whatever guns we need, we're going to get them directly from the manufacturer so that I know they have never been loaded. I'm going to have a chain of custody. They call this in, police evidence stuff, right? I'm going to know where that gun came from. I know it's going to be stored in my warehouse on my property. I'm going to know that a bullet was never near it. I'm going to know that when it is like leased out to a production that they will sign, 8 million things and everybody will be trained. Bullets are never to touch these guns. Then it won't be a problem.
I think what I'm going to do is, this is a good time, because I think I want to follow the natural progression of the conversation here and share what my brother has shared with me. Because I don't think anybody in Hollywood disagrees with you. And I don't think you're talking about anything that isn't already procedure in quote Hollywood. Now, this wasn't a Hollywood production. This wasn't a Warner Brothers.
No, I know. It was independent. Right.
It was independent. And this, I have an article from the father of the armor as well, talking about how he feels that she was sabotaged. But first, I'm going to share what my brother said. He said, my prop guy, with no question, said that it was absolutely on the armor prop people. They should not have allowed live rounds anywhere near set. Regionally, there are different terms, protocols, but they all generally accomplish the same thing. What also is interesting, that the actors union, stage actors, not film, so this is a different group than what we're talking about, but dictates specific protocols and rules for weapons use in a theater. The prop person shows them the weapon, show what it is or is not loaded, and terms are used to clearly identify if the weapon is loaded, cold, or hot gun. Now, this, I think this is the crux of the issue here. Because
why is there ever a loaded gun? Okay, anyway.
This is what Alec Baldwin is saying. Alec Baldwin's saying, and I think the core question is, does he have a reason to, one, is he liable? And two, does he have a reason to feel like he's innocent and he's, this is a problem with, something else? And one of the daughter here, the father of the armor, I'm just going to go through the main quotes. And I'm just going to share this article here from an interview he had. So Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father, Thel Reed, and he was an armorer as well. He's a veteran armorer who worked on films, including 310 to Yuma. He maintains his daughter did everything right and checked Baldwin's gun before handing to Dave Halls, the assistant director. Both he and Hannah's attorney say the set was most likely sabotaged by a disgruntled crew member. In the days before the accident, several crew members quit and protest over conditions. Now, one of the things they were talking about is there was multiple misfires on the flash charges, I think it was, not live rounds. And there was people that had quit actually that morning for safety concerns. Reed's father says he didn't like that she had to supervise both guns and props. No one has been arrested yet for the October 21st shooting. Now, I want to jump ahead to something else that links into that. So I'm just sort of setting the table for this conversation here, Dixon.
Yeah, and I got to say, just while you do 1 second, which is I don't really like that statement much, and I'll tell you why. To just throw out there with no evidence and no direct knowledge that one of these crew members who works complaining about working conditions must have loaded a gun as revenge. I mean, that's a hell of an accusation, but anyway.
Well, I think it also points to something else, and I'm going to play, because George Clooney, as part of this interview, he was very vocal in an interview about this.
Any lengths.
And I need to find the part 3. This is where production value is not great.
I'm gonna get my banjo just a second here.
Oh my god! See, this is the problem. If I don't get better with production, then we are going to be forced to listen to banjo music.
Oh well, there's that. Or maybe I'll finally
channel.
learn to juggle. I've always meant to do that, and I've never quite gotten it. You know, so I could be juggling here. I could tell a quick joke. You know, like
everything is. Here we go. Part 3, and I have the timestamp 3:27.
Right?
So bear with.
Be handing
Bear with.
A guy went into a doctor's office, and the doctor says, "I've got bad news for you."
I'm pointed at anybody.
I'm trying to, I can't multitask. I can't.
I'm not trying to get you to multitask. I'm trying to entertain our crew, you know, our audience, right?
So 3:27, and this is the crux of the issue here. Just another clip. I'm not sure if this is the clip I want, but I'm going to play it because it still is the key part of the conversation here.
Mm-hmm. People said to me, I mean, I got countless people online saying, "Idiot, you never point a gun at someone." Well, unless you're told it's empty, and it's the director of photography who's instructing you on the angle for a shot we're going to do. And she and I had this thing in common where we both thought it was empty, and it wasn't. And that's not her responsibility. That's not my responsibility. Whose responsibility is remains to be seen. But I do.
Well, there are some who say you're never supposed to point a gun at anyone on a set, no matter what.
Unless the person is the cinematographer who's directing me where to point the gun for her camera angle. That's exactly what happened. That day, I
this is where I think his lawyers are just going, "Oh my God, this is just going so poorly for us."
He didn't need to do this interview at all. Yes,
So,
yes.
And this is the crux of the issue. Really, is what responsibility does the actor have? Because it's all well and good. Because there was a few things I read on Reddit from people who claim to be NRA weapons trainers who were saying that the actor needs to check the gun. George Clooney said, "I always check the gun. You know, I always check the gun, confirmed it was a cold, whatever." And everything I've read, and I've done quite a lot of searching just from, you know, even before this, just to see what the protocol is. And the protocol is, as the armorer, their job is to possess, you know, make sure those weapons are safe, make sure they're in control of the correct people. So my understanding is the armorer should have handed the gun to Alec Baldwin, checked it with Alec Baldwin, confirming that it was a cold gun, and in fact, there was no live rounds in it. Handed Alec Baldwin the gun. He's aware that this gun, if I pointed at somebody because the armor has just showed and checked it to me, because I'm a dumbass actor and I'm not somebody who's focused on safety right now. I'm focused on a scene and being in a character and whatever. Is that's what they're doing. She didn't do that. So I think for her father to say, you know, she gave the gun to the assistant director who, you know, kind of likes guns. You know, I told him it was a cold gun, and she was supposed to give it to Alec Baldwin, not the assistant director. She was supposed to be on set to monitor safety. She was supposed to be on set to take that gun back. But there's a debate with people who are gun people, who know guns, who say you never point a gun at anybody. And I saw a quote from somebody who claimed to be an NRA trainer or something, that if Jesus himself handed me a gun and said it was safe, I would check it. Now, yeah. I don't know what I think about that, because I'm just trying to find an analogous situation. So for instance, if let's say you are firing an honorary cannon by pulling the trigger, are you asking them to check the you know, the cannon to make sure that it's safely loaded and not going to blow up in my face? Is that relative? I don't know. Like when I was doing the ropes course thing, we would train people to do squeeze checks on the carabiners. Now, if that kid fell because the squeeze check wasn't done by their partner, I'm liable because I'm responsible for safety, not the kid doing the squeeze check on the carabiner. And in film anyway, how many scenes have we seen where guns are pointed at people regularly? So to say you shouldn't point a cold gun at anybody because it could, you know, I guess for safety reasons, understandably so, it's a deadly weapon, a gun. Is that realistic in Hollywood? And these are all the questions I have surrounding this conversation.
I will say that I am disinclined to blame Alec Baldwin. Having said this, I do not know obviously I never worked on a Hollywood set, so I don't know what all the proper protocols are. So let me preface this by
You and
saying,
I both. Yeah.
right. So having said that, I would expect, my expectation would be, I should say, is that actors are not weapons experts, as you've said.
Yeah.
And that there is somebody on set who is, and it's that person's job to check, double check, triple check. And, you know, I've read similar things to what you have said, that to show the actor this is indeed. Having said that, I have also read that the actor's supposed to check too.
With
that is
the armor, I think, though. I don't think
right.
the armor checks and then puts the gun, so, you know, this is a cold gun, I'm
right.
handing it to you. And then Alec Baldwin says, the fuck are you doing? I'm just going to check it myself, and rechecks it again. Yeah, you were right. Okay.
Well, I mean, but I think that, you know, I understand that. What I am more interested in, and honestly, I wonder about the cinematographer. I'm also willing to take, for the moment, Alec Baldwin's statement on faith that the cinematographer and he were, you know, simpatico about what they were doing. That she felt confident that the gun was not loaded. And I'm sure that that's everybody's, you know, like, here's an analogy I'll use. I remember reading once, you know how people, we're both baseball fans, right? And people will occasionally get frustrated with players, you know, who they hit a sharp ground ball to shortstop, and, you know, it's throw out first. And well, why didn't they bust it down the line? Why did they, you know, why were they sort of jogging to first base? And somebody said, you know, yeah, on the one hand, every fan feels that, because fans feel like, listen, you know, for us, it's imaginary to be out there playing Major League Baseball. And you think to yourself, gee, if I ever got that chance, I'd be out there. I'd do everything I could to, you know, no matter what, every max effort, every play.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you know, these are people who've done grounded out to short more times than you have taken out the garbage, you know what I mean, in your life. And after a certain point, when you hit a sharp ground ball directly to the shortstop who scoops it up, and you've got 3 steps out of the box and he's already up and ready to throw, you know, you don't, like, you stop feeling like, you know, it's just human beings. It's just how we're wired.
Yeah.
So like, you do it a million times. So I could see an actor and the cinematographer both kind of like, we've been on sets a billion times. We work with this stuff a billion times. The armor says it's good. It's good. You know, you're not really sitting there thinking that this is a possibility, and you get a little lax about it. The one thing I would say, though, is if indeed is the practice and the rule that you don't ever point a gun on set, you could blame Alec Baldwin for that, but also I'd be asking the cinematographer, why would you, like, you can set the shot and record it, you know, like, look at what you're looking at
on the screen,
and then on the screen, and then say, okay, I'm going to step away now, and like, we're going to get the shot. And that actually makes his story about the hammer sound a little bit more plausible to me, that he didn't pull the trigger per se, and that they were, because they weren't filming a loaded gun being trigger pulled shot at the camera. What they were filming was like trying to get, is this, can you see this? Can you see this? Can you see this? And before she starts the shot, she wants to know, like, she's looking at the screen to see, okay, yeah. And then, you know, his thumb slips off the hammer. Again, I don't know enough about the mechanics of how guns work, whether that is possible, or if a gun maybe is itself, besides being loaded, also had failure in the mechanism that was supposed to stop that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, and this is what the police are looking at this. And I just read an article that came out today. The police are particularly interested in where the live round came from.
Oh yeah, of course they are.
Because I think we both agree that Alec Baldwin wasn't a disgruntled actor producer who decided to shoot a
cinematographer.
But I think there's a debate that we won't be able to settle. You know, as far as, is it reasonable for a Hollywood set to have real guns with no ammunition? Because I mean, he makes the point later on, and this actually hurts his case, that there's something like 3 million bullets have been fired, guns have been fired. Sorry, let me try this again. 3 million guns have been fired on sets, and no one's been injured or killed, or very few people have, which actually hurts his argument or hurts his time in court. Because if it's so safe, why were things so negligent on your, you know, if it's such an anomalous situation, what are you doing to create that anomalous situation? Sure. And I think the issue, we can argue that, you know, what Hollywood does might not be legally correct or might not be correct in the eyes of the NRA. It's the legal question doesn't necessarily fall in line with what Hollywood or what those standards are for an armor. I think Alec Baldwin now is going to start setting the table for what he is concerned about, which is his liability as a producer. Because at the end of the day, they hired
He doesn't
an
want to
armorer.
get sued. That's why he's doing this interview, right?
Well,
This
he is
about
getting sued now.
Right. And he's going to get sued. And like, he's seeing, his personal liability, his personal fortune, whatever it is probably entirely on the table right now. I mean, like to the point of bankruptcy. And so I'm sure that's what this interview was about.
It's going to be a definite concern because when again you go back to liability, it's down to the producers to hire people to keep the actors and the staff on set, the production group safe.
Yes.
And the armorer, I think it's going to be shown, and it's not been like it's been a secret. The armorer wasn't there handing the gun to Alec Baldwin, wasn't checking the gun with Alec Baldwin, was checking the gun with somebody else. And if I was, again, what my expertise used to be on was sort of, I know I'm a big dude, but rock climbing and safety and that sort of thing. I would never say, hey, Mrs. Jones, you're a responsible teacher. You seem to understand what's going on with these harnesses. Did it seem like it was good? Yeah, it was good. Okay, why don't you take care of that? Now, if something happened with that kid falling off of a zip line or something, I'd be in the shit because I'm responsible for safety.
Mm-hmm.
So the producers are the ones, and my wife works in construction. If something happens on a construction site and somebody does something stupid and they weren't trained properly or they weren't signed off and they did something stupid that caused loss of life, the person in charge of the company would be the one in the shit. The person who didn't make sure the safety standards were in place. And this is what's coming down to, because there's in this interview, there's a very weird narrative. There's a very strange narrative here that just doesn't make sense. And I'm going to play it from when he found out about this. This is the weirdest thing in this interview in my eyes. I'm going to try to find, Sean, you asshole. You are an asshole. I'm not quite ready with the clip because I changed it.
Well, that gives me a moment here to chip in something as I referred.
Christ. Yes.
That's what everybody needs is more talking from me.
No, I need you to fill time. Go.
Well, yeah, here we go.
I would never.
But no, I mean, really, and I mentioned it earlier, the obvious analogous situation, and one where I don't think, I mean, there probably might have been a law. I'd have to go back and read how much of a lawsuit there was, but it really was a truly tragic, but ultimately, if you're going to use real guns on set and that you can't absolutely guarantee that have never been loaded ever, situation with the Crow, right? I don't know if you know exactly how that went down.
I read about it a long time ago, but I couldn't speak on it.
So what happened there? And that's what's so obviously, I mean, what's distressing about this situation, because if they had a similar situation, the narrative would be totally different right now. What happened on the set of The Crow was they had a gun, obviously, that turned out to be live. In this sense, there was a bullet in the muzzle. But what had happened was, and there was no way that anybody could have known this, at some point, this gun had been loaded with live rounds. And one of those live rounds, evidently, you know how a bullet is constructed, right? There's the bullet, and then it's basically lodged into a shell, and the shell has the gunpowder. That's the charge that propels the bullet out when it's struck by the hammer out of the muzzle. Well, evidently the shell that it had been in there was a failure at the factory level. That shell had not been properly filled. It had been filled only with the tiniest amount of gunpowder, like just a little smidgen, just enough that when that live round was fired at some point prior, who knows when, prior to the filming of this sequence, and it was the last. And that's the other tragedy of it. Like, you think to yourself, well, it could have been any bullet that might have happened, but it had to happen to be the last time this gun had been fired. It had just enough charge to send the bullet out of the casing, but that's it. So it lodged in the barrel. So when the prop master opens the gun and looks at it, obviously the shells are all empty. You look at the gun, it appears to be unloaded. And there's no way that anybody can know. So then what they do, of course, is they load it with fake rounds, which involve a full charge, but just a piece of cardboard at the end to cap the charge. Yeah. So what gets propelled out is a harmless piece of cardboard. Doesn't matter how fast you send it. But of course, with the bullet sitting in the barrel, that is what happened, and that is how Brandon Lee was killed. But that obviously is like a lie. I mean, I don't know if eventually the gun manufacturer or the bullet manufacturer was sued, but I don't think you couldn't look at it. There was nobody you could say, hey, you screwed up. You were supposed to spot this. There was no way. I mean, how do you, unless maybe I'm wrong. Like, I don't know if the process, maybe it now does. Maybe now what's included, it wouldn't surprise me if what a prop master is supposed to do is, in addition to checking that the gun is like not loaded, like fish down that barrel with some kind of tool and make sure there isn't anything in there. But I can't imagine that prior to that incident that it would have occurred to anybody.
Well, you know who actually highlighted this not so much what happened on the, and it was interesting because I didn't know the detail with that.
Yeah.
Of all things, I was looking at videos this week. The person who addressed the way that this is normally checked is Luke fucking Duke, John Schneider.
That's the most NRA name I've ever heard, by the way.
I love it. So Luke Duke from the original Dukes of Hazzard childhood show that I watched, he was showing a Colt revolver, a similar gun, and he one of the things he mentioned was when you check a revolver, you need to remove the dial. Everybody who is into guns watching this is going, "Oh man, you know what the fuck you're talking about."
Yeah, we clearly don't.
You take out the spinny thing, and then you can there's a pin you pull out. At the top is a little rod. You pull that rod out, and then you have the chamber. You pull the chamber, not the chamber, but the where the bullets are out. And then once you
I think that is called the chamber. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
No, but once you take that out, then you can safely check the barrel itself because now there's space behind it. See if there's any unexpelled cartridge or if there's anything in the actual barrel of the gun.
Oh.
So it is something that I did learn about this week indirectly, as far as I didn't realize that was what happened on the Crow. But
so maybe there was more liability, and maybe I should go get that NRA membership finally, so I can learn these things.
We need to consider it. Maybe the NRA is actually saving lives.
Maybe they are.
We may have this wrong. So I'm going to play a clip here because now this gets a bit weird because Alec Baldwin is painting the picture in this next clip of somebody who didn't know that Helena Hutchins was shot until he was at the police station hours later. And I find this to be where it really kind of goes off the rails for me as not so much somebody who's trying to protect his own personal livelihood from being arrested. I think he doesn't expect, and I wouldn't expect he's going to go to jail for shooting somebody. However, when it comes to him as a producer, I think he's starting damage limitation and blame shifting. But this narrative he's pitching is weird. I'm going to share this now, which it's queued up.
Told you what happened?
No. It wasn't until I was in the police station. Hours later, I mean, it was like seeing aliens. It was utter disbelief over the idea. It was unacceptable, the idea that it was a live round. And finally, one of the police officers at the conclusion of my interview, I was there for like an hour and a half or so, she takes her phone and she slides it across to me. She says, "That's what came out of Joel's shoulder, a .45 caliber slug. It was a real bullet."
Had you known that Joel had been hit?
No one had any idea until that police officer, that sheriff's officer said to me, "This is the slug, .45 caliber slug they took out of Joel's arm."
This drives me nuts because Alec Baldwin is arguably intelligent enough. And there was a lot of people that commented. There was even like the electrician was talking about holding her. So she apparently was shot, said she couldn't feel her legs, fell down, and very quickly everything turned for Helena, very sadly. And I can't imagine.
I've lost you. I don't know if I'm still in the studio.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, there you're back. You're back. I was about to go break into my my budding stand-up routine. Go ahead.
We need to address. I'm sorry about that. But he's arguably somebody who's somewhat intelligent, and he's now painting the picture. So I don't know if what you heard from what I was saying, but the electrician talked about, she went down and the director was actually shot in the shoulder, was screaming. Now, what Alec Baldwin said in the interview, I don't want to play too much of it. I'm sure we're going to get a copyright strike or whatever. We don't make money on this channel, so it doesn't matter. But he was saying that he was screaming. He was screaming. And Alec Baldwin said the first thing he thought, the second that the gun went off, was she fainted. Which I can understand that split second thought going through your head.
Sure.
Because there's a bit of disbelief and your brain is not going to process, I shot somebody straight away.
Right, sure.
But then to say that you found out by having the police officer, if he's saying slid the picture,
there had to be blood everywhere.
Well, this is the thing.
Do you know what a 45 does? Jesus.
Yeah. And to be able to say that the police officer, if let's say he's saying it was a surprise, the police officer sliding that picture over saying this is what we pulled out of her shoulder was probably like, I can't believe he's acting like he doesn't know what's going on. He probably was in the police. It's no different than whenever you see these people who are being interrogated, who come in on their own volition to speak about something they've probably done. They'll spend 4 or 5 hours there before the police are like, aren't you curious why we're still keeping you here? You know, you're not complaining. This is, and they're probably like, Christ on a bike. There's a bullet. How did you not see this bullet when she was shot? And at one point in the interview, he says, oh, it's, when we were there, at the ranch, it just seemed to take forever for the helicopter to get here to take her out. So he's aware that there's something wrong with her. A gun is shot, and he hasn't realized that there's a bullet in her until a few hours later at the police station.
I didn't actually know before right now that it was a 45 caliber gun that had been used. And by the way, one of the things that my father taught me, so any NRA people listening, don't think we're complete ignoramuses. When you have an automatic weapon, I don't know if this was an automatic weapon or not, but when you have an automatic,
I don't know.
Is a revolver? Oh, so a revolver is not automatic. When you have an automatic weapon, like this is what I do know, right? Like they have clips that have the number of bullets in them, and then they're loaded automatically into the chamber, and then. That when you remove the clip, some idiots think that means the gun is unloaded, but every time you fire a bullet, the next one is automatically loaded into the chamber. So even when the clip is removed, there's a bullet in the chamber, so you cannot fire.
That's why in films you always see them do that thing whenever they
where they open it. Yeah. Now, having said that, what I don't understand, I mean, the 45, the whole point of a 45, the reason why it's recommended for home defense, especially, I think, for someone who's inexperienced basically with firearms and is getting it for that purpose. Not that I would do this, but the idea of the 45 is you don't have to be any kind of marksman. You hit somebody anywhere with a 45, it is taking that person down. You are going to stop them, because getting hit with a 22, people can actually kind of keep still moving if you didn't hit them someplace vital or whatever. 45, the idea is, it's like getting hit with a baseball bat in the middle of the chest. If it hits your leg, shoulder, anywhere, you're going down. The kickback on a 45 knocks people over if you're not used to it. You know what I mean? Like that amount of kickback. So the idea that a 45 caliber round could have entered somebody and you wouldn't know immediately. I mean, maybe for that split second, I agree. Like thinking, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But there had to have been blood everywhere. Not a chance that there wasn't.
Yeah.
At that close range it's being described too, it would have been through and through, I'm sure.
That if anybody, and I
recommend for the cinematographer. Go on, please.
And I recommend anybody watch that body language panel. I was showing the clip earlier. They talked about that because two of those guys were ex-military and experts in interrogation. And they of course are weapons trained. And they were saying, that size, that gauge bullet is going to cause a lot of blood, especially that bullet went through her and into the director. So there was an exit wound. There is, and if it's not as if it's like, oh, Helene is on the floor, something's not right. Why don't we just gather everybody and go outside and
smoke a cigarette? We'll see if she wakes up in a few minutes.
I don't want anything to do with this. She's it's just kind of, it's awkward. It's kind of cringy. I feel like it's going to really put me, let's go outside. And then later the police are like, so you a producer on this thing. What do you think happened? And I would love to see the video of this interrogation, because if, let's say, he's making that statement that he didn't know until 2 hours later when they showed the bullet, he must have been sitting in this interrogation room or at the police station not talking about what happened. If he's making the claim that I just found out there was a bullet in my friend 2 hours into my time at the police station, it's just a weird thing to say, and I think it's going to be problematic come trial time.
I mean, this whole interview is a disaster. I mean, it's just a disaster. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, if you felt the need, he didn't have to do anything other than, if I were doing this interview, I might grant it in the sense that, like, you feel the need to make a public statement. But again, no production values. I would tell ABC or whoever was doing it, like, we're doing this as a straight live interview. This is it. And I'm going to come on and here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about This is a devastating tragedy for this woman and her family. She was a beautiful person and a talented cinematographer, and it is a tremendous loss for our community. And I can't believe that my production is responsible, to some degree, or this happened on, I guess, I understand lawyers are going to say you can't say responsible, but like that this happened on my production. We're going to do a full investigation, get to the bottom of exactly what happened. And all I can say beyond that is I am so profoundly sorry. You have no idea. I will never, ever be able to live this down. I will see this in my dreams from now until my last day. And that's what I would say.
And he does say that to a degree in this interview, but I think if you look at, if there's ever an example as to why you shouldn't speak, in situations like this, if I think about what my point of view was on Alec Baldwin before I saw this interview, I thought, he's going to be somewhat liable here because he's a producer. I don't think it's clearly an accident, and they're going to sort of hash it out. I left this interview feeling like he's being a bit underhanded to try to push blame and protect himself as a producer.
Yes,
I wouldn't have
that's
thought that had I not seen this interview. And it's just, it's such what you would call here in the UK, it was an own goal. That interview was an own goal in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. There's, of course, I think there's lawsuits. There's going to be a criminal trial. The police are still investigating it. I imagine it's something we'll come back to in 6 to 8 months and revisit it and see what happens in court, what evidence is brought forward. But yeah, that is the Alec Baldwin case. And if anybody watching this has stuck around, one, you should be subscribing for the love of Christ. And two, love to hear your thoughts and see if you agree with us. I love when people disagree with us. I will pin your comment if you're really shitty to us because I think it's funny.
It would have been useful to have some NRA folks on here today, I think, because honestly, this is one of those things. I know we talk a lot about guns on here, and I think you and I have very similar views on guns. And I'm very suspicious of anyone's specific need. I don't begrudge people. Like, here's how I would own if I felt like I wanted to own a gun for sport and for fun. I think a gun club seems like a good idea, place, and I would keep. I know that there are people probably who do this, and fancier than me people, who belong to very high-end country clubs. They probably keep their golf clubs at the country club. They don't haul them back and forth with them every time they go to their club to play a round of golf, right? Well, I think
member of a club. I can keep my electric hand cart thing there. You can you get your own locker.
There you go. Well, that's what I'm talking about. And to me, that's where I would keep the gun out of my home. Guns out of my home, and then they're at a place where they're appropriate to be used, and etc. That's like my vision of how gun ownership ought to really work. But having said that, I don't, really begrudge people their guns necessarily. But and it's also important. This is where I was going with this: is that guns are a fact. They're going to be a fact, and that's fine. And that's why the NRA and things like that, when they are serving that function of promoting gun safety and teaching people the right way to handle armor and ammunition and things like that, they do serve a very useful function in a world where guns are a fact. You know what I mean? Like, you need people to train and know what they're doing, and people who don't train and know what they're doing should not have them. And I think most NRA members, really do agree with that. Like, you're an ass if you don't. Like, having a gun is a serious responsibility, and you are doing yourself and the whole world a disservice if you don't, take some classes or do whatever, train with somebody who really knows what they're doing, especially around the safety protocols. Like, my father taught riflery actually at Bluebell Junior Camp. Now, they only used BB guns, but the first two weeks, think about this. It's an 8-week camp. So you only get, if you're a little kiddo going to that camp, you only get 8 sessions at riflery. It was a once a week thing. And of the 8, only 6 did you actually get to shoot anything, because the first 2 full sessions, he spent 40 minutes going through with them. The first session was, if you have a gun in your home, here are all the things you may not do. Donnie don't. And the second session was, and here I'm going to show you the parts of the BB gun. It's obviously not a rifle, and this is how you check if it's loaded, and this is what you never ever do. And and then I think like they would do like a fire practice, but there was no BBs in there, to learn all the protocols before he ever let anybody fire a gun. And so, that camp attracts very wealthy and very fairly, it's a Jewish day camp. So, the people who are wealthy and Jewish tend, although it's changing, they tend to be fairly left of center. And so there's a lot of suspicion of guns, but he never gets the director of that camp, who I'm still friendly with. He was so nice to my father, and they became friends, even though my father was really his employee. But he said in all the years he's run that camp, he's never gotten a complaint about there being a riflery class, even though the kinds of moms who are moms of these kids a lot of them are probably members of things like Moms Demand Action and anti-gun, other anti-gun or pro-gun reform groups, because what they're doing there is you demystify the thing so that the kid, if they do find a gun, they don't, go, ooh, like, I got to go play with this. And his best story about that was, and he, complimented my father about it, was that he had two kids who went to the camp, and they were in a park one day, not at camp, just whatever, on a Saturday or something. And they found a gun in the park. And because of what they learned at Bluebell Junior Camp, they took the gun, they found the nearest adult, and they turned it in. Right. Yeah. And that all comes from proper training. And so there you go.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story coming from, especially if you've watched this before. That wouldn't be a story that I think people watching would expect to come from you, especially given the last few episodes where we've talked about this.
No, there's value in proper training.
Yeah, and I think it sort of begs the question in this situation, and this is something that I'm struggling with, and I wouldn't mind some knowledgeable people. And actually, I'll remind me to come back to before we wrap up. We did have a comment from somebody who's got 500 subscribers who was hammering the Rittenhouse case, who had very strong opinions on what we discussed. And this is somebody who he seems like a really sound guy. I'll have to find his channel. I'm really sorry. I'll try to put it in the description, because I watched some of his stuff. But he clearly is much more knowledgeable on guns than us. But I would love to reach out to someone like him and see if he'd want to join us for a conversation on guns when, let's say, another case comes up, because I think we disagree largely, but I'm sure there's points we agree.
That would be a fabulous idea if he'd be willing to do it with us.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I'll send you the comments, and maybe it's something we can raise at another time. But one of the things I think, and this is something I'd like to ask him, or anybody who likes guns, is it reasonable for Hollywood or for any movie making or filmmaking set? So if the rules are followed as far as what an armor should do, no live rounds near the set. I believe they were actually using that gun to target shoot at some point, which is just stupid. No. I mean, you can't, just so stupid. But let's say that the rules were followed. Nobody gets hurt and everything's fine. Is it reasonable for, to have a proper armor on set who knows what they're doing? Is it reasonable to have guns on a set that are handled by people in a film setting, live guns, and pointing them at all different directions? Because that's what happens on a film. You're pointing guns at other actors that have false charges in them or whatever. Is it feasible, or is it something that Hollywood and the filmmaking industry should have real replicas made that will never shoot a bullet but will look like they shoot a bullet? This is a question I can't answer, because I don't feel like it's a dangerous thing if you have a trained armor on the set checking, rechecking, handing a safe gun and allowing them to use it without having to train the actor how to recheck the gun themselves. I don't see an issue with that, but I'd like to be corrected on that if I'm wrong.
I feel like, and again, I'm certainly no expert in guns, but I actually, now that you raise a really good point there, and I actually feel like that there are guns that are designed in such a way that you can remove the firing pin such that the gun will still look like a gun and it will do all the things that a gun does, but it will obviously not be able to fire. It will disable the gun. And, the sound, I mean, I guess the idea is that when you're filming, the reason why you needed to film blanks is because you want that sound, to be there. But I mean, Hollywood can certainly, and I understand that in if you have some scene where you have, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like the end of Unforgiven or something, where like there's all kinds of guns going off all at once, or it's a war or something that, where you might say, like, well, this might be too much, but I mean, they add sound effects in post-production all the time. Why do they need to be recording the sound live on the set? And if that's the only reason that the guns are even firing at all, like, maybe it's just time to stop that. And you can, and I'm fairly certain that you can get, take guns and just remove the firing pin, and that will prevent this strategy from ever happening again.
It's a tricky one, because I think that the rules in place have been largely successful, especially since, and my brother, one of the things he mentioned, and I can understand wanting to have something that looks authentic and shoots. It's even as part of the process of the actors reacting to the sound.
Yeah.
But he's saying the gun in their show, so this is more of a prop gun, is a non-active prop that doesn't have to shoot. It's a 6-shooter that is welded in every chamber, and the barrel is welded so it can't even spin. But it's a real gun that's been modified. So for the look, it's there, but it can't be fired. I just can't see any reason. Because I think if you're saying if you shouldn't put, because a gun is a deadly weapon, and I don't disagree with this comment. I'm talking about in the context of having an armorer hand a cold gun, have it properly checked, confirmed. In films, if your view is they shouldn't point this gun at anybody, how many films have I watched? And Unforgiven's a great example. Where how many times are people pointing guns and
at other actors,
at other actors and pulling the trigger?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because as I was saying the comment, I said to myself, wait a minute, like, what do you mean this rule that you're not supposed to point a gun at somebody? There's a billion movies where it happens constantly. Pulp Fiction. I mean, some of it might be, movie tricks, where
it's behind the camera.
I mean, where your mind tells you, oh, he pointed that gun at that person, but if you actually look how the shot is constructed, it never really happened. Actually, Pulp Fiction's a good example in the sense that I don't know if that's true or not of Pulp Fiction, but one of the things about Pulp Fiction in my mind is like it has this reputation for being horrifically violent. However, actually, when you go pound for pound in that movie, there's not really a lot of gore. But having said that, I'm sure if I start thinking about movies, I'll be able to think of movies where, it certainly appears that a gun was absolutely pointed at an actor and fired. I mean, obviously it happened with Brandon Lee. I mean, that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how things unfold. I think we've hammered that one, and I think we definitely will need to be coming back to that. But I think that's us done for this week.
I think so.
We're gonna be recording every other week. Possibly if something comes up, we may record. I believe we were talking about going into, what was the next one that we're
Tommy Ziegler, which is an interesting. This is back to a little bit of what we haven't done in a while, which is cold case, true crime. It's not cold. He's on death row. And on December the 24th, I think 1972, but don't quote me on the year. So Christmas Eve, he or someone murdered his wife and his father-in-law and his mother-in-law and a black man named Charlie Mays in a furniture store called Ziegler Furniture Store that he owned in Winter Haven, Florida. And Tommy Ziegler was eventually arrested, tried, and convicted for the crime and sentenced to death, and is probably one of the longest tenured people on death row because 50 years later, basically, he sits still on death row because there are questions about both the competency of his trial and the actual, question of his guilt. And it's just one of the most fascinating true crime cases. I mean, you could talk about it and think about it for hours. I certainly have, and days even, because there's so much to it. And it really is a genuine kind of whodunit. Like, he is the obvious suspect. There's lots to suggest in my mind that he did it, but the circumstances are so unusual that it's really hard to truly know. And it's one of those, one of my favorite things about true crime and is really these kinds of, what Unsolved Mysteries, I'll borrow it, used to call final appeal segments. And that's how I was originally introduced to this case, through that show and its final appeal segment, because it's really down to that question of, the limits of knowledge and an epistemological question about how do we know what we know and what can we know. It's really fascinating stuff. And of course, there are 4 wonderful human beings, I'm sure, who are dead 50 years after the fact. And there may or may not be somebody who sat on death row awaiting an execution he clearly does not deserve. And so it's a fascinating case, and its anniversary is coming up.
Well, I think we'll be recording that in 2 weeks' time, a la our runaway hit Darlie Roudier series. I think we'll do that in a one go. Well, we'll probably record it in one go and divide that up. But if you're still here watching, please do subscribe. Please do comment. We do read the comments. Don't reply to them all. We've had, for some of those cold case shows, we've had so many comments, and it's really interesting to read. But yeah, again, thank you for tuning in, and please do let us know in the comments your thoughts, and we'll catch up with you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.